Cebu is one of the islands where most foreigners would associate themselves and experience when it comes to the Philippines. Well, aside from Manila, but it is up there in terms of historical and economic factor. What many people would not think of Cebu is the Chinese community.
But is it there?
Well, you may say.
Manila has been known that Chinatown is one of the oldest in the world.
Well, first of all, how did you get into this video? But second of all, think about it. Even though Cebu is the oldest colony in the Philippines, we don't have the oldest Chinatown. In fact, where is Chinatown? Is it here?
Is it there? Should we go?
Well, the answer a bit complicated. So come with us as we're going to explore and answer once and for all where the Cebu Chinatown is and why does no one bother to find it?
Asia has been a fascinating place for many people around the world, even to Asians themselves. The spices found in this specific region are a prized commodity for specific people. Well, we are talking about Europeans and their never-ending quest for spice. Yes, spice. So Spain, taking the unusual route of crossing the vastness of the Pacific Ocean just to reach Asia, means a lot and tells a lot of the value of these spices. Thus, after a long journey which resulted to deaths, they arrived here in the island of Borneo.
Over 500 years ago, Ferdinand Magellan, a man with a fashionable and fancy pose, was tasked by the Spanish crown to find another route. He arrives in the Philippines, more specifically the island of Cebu.
He landed, planted a flag and cross, claiming this land for God and Spain, which is kind of awkward later on during his stay. He and his other fashionable companion, Picafetta, has noted something odd. There are people on this island, and they're traders. They worship foreign gods and bathe more than us. How barbaric! So, after converting king and piss off the other, they went to battle, Magellan died, and their crew limped their way back to Europe, where they spread the word of another way to Asia, and most probably, civilize and convert the natives to true faith. It's colonizing, and they just want to colonize.
But let us backtrack a bit to something very interesting. Picafetta didn't just report about the natives of the islands, but he noticed the existence of Chinese traders as well. Mostly from Fujian region of southern China, these traders came, traded, married locals, and flourished. So, when one man named Miguel Lopez de Legazpi came and officially established the first Spanish colony in the Philippines right here in Cebu in 1565, he wasn't so happy with the natives and the Chinese he saw who were on the same place he established. I mean, what can he do? Coexist with them? Play fair games and not discriminate? No. So on that same year, he put up a policy dividing the people who were from Spain and not so Spain but now part of Spain. Although sometime later, Mr. Legazpi started to realize that he is not getting enough supplies for his colony in Cebu, so he took a detour and found another colony in the nearby island of what we call Panay, and thus looked up north to the island of Luzon. He then did what he did best, conquering and establishing another colony in 1571 on what we know now as the Grand City of Manila.
Manila, now established as new headquarters of the colonial government, attract the Spaniard and the Chinese alike to go settle there, with more forgiving terrain and more resources to spare, unlike Cebu. Chinese, not being native, nor white, nor Spanish, got ostracized by the society at the time. So, they came up with a plan. Why not make a community of our own? So they then went north and resettled in the settlement known as the area known as Parian, which still stands today. There are many good reasons why the Chinese used to settle in this area.
The area was first settled by 200 Chinese, mostly artisans and traders. Later on, during 1600s, the Jesuits came and converted the Chinese. So now they aren't only worshipping many gods, they now worship many gods and one supreme god, like a good Christian that they are. They even dedicated their own money to build a church named San Juan Bautista Parish Church, with the Jesuits by their side. You can even still visit the site today of the Jesuits' house and the parish as well.
Well, you can still visit the site today of the Jesuits' house and the parish. Well, not in their original form, but you can still visit.
Well, wait a minute. A viewer might ask, isn't this just the beginning of the Chinatown? How come you said there isn't one in Cebu? Well, first of all, I want you to wait until the later part of the video. And second of all, there's a certain event that occurred around 1740s until the tail end of the 18th century. The reasons? There are many.
Well, for one, the Spanish restructured their organization, which gave more power to the natives. So the Christianized Chinese and the Chinese mestizo got more power, while the Chinese got expelled. And second, in 1760s, the Philippines was briefly occupied by a new upstart empire that started to emerge. What empire, you might ask? Well, it's this empire. The last nail in the coffin came around 1768, when the Jesuits, the main Christian order for the mestizo Chinese, was expelled from the colony, causing another ripple effect with the leaving of the faithful Chinese from the area of Parian.
So, you may now question, isn't this just the end of Parian, Cebu's Chinatown as a whole? Since a lot of people have already been mixed with the Chinese blood? True, you may be right. For the Parian area, because we're now entering the new period where it's cemented the fact that the Chinese are here to stay and they'll stay here as long as they want.
In 1788, after years of consideration, the Spanish authority repealed the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the race was on for the Chinese to come back from abroad. Waves upon waves resettled in Parian, but now with time has passed by so much, it has changed dramatically. Parian River, which was the lifeblood for trading for the ones living in Parian, and one of the primary reasons for the settlement in the first place, has silted and thus are now not navigable for trade. This cannot do for the Chinese. So, what did they do? They moved near to the fort and settled there.
Now, you may think to yourself, Mr. Presenter, that's very impressive and all, but Manila still would hold more Chinese population there. Well, I'm about to present to you something that the Chinese would love the most.
Cha!
Yeah, okay, maybe the second thing that the Chinese love the most. Trade.
In 1860, Cebu port was once again open to the world to trade with the island directly. With this opportunity, plenty more migrants came and settled in Cebu. Japanese, English, and yes, our old friend, the Chinese. The Chinese came in such a big number that 20 years later, in 1880, the colonial government restructured the administrative ward and now dedicated a specific ward for the Chinese. But sadly, in 1898, as a revolutionary spirit rose in Cebu with the 3 de Abril revolt, many shops of the Chinese in those areas, both in Lutao and Parian, were burned and looted, causing a huge amount of damage. But, of course, this was never the end. They rose again and continued the endeavor even during the American occupation. As time passed on, the Chinese mestizos has grown the consciousness of the Chinese community for the Cebuano Chinese all around the island. They even came together to repeal the Chinese Exclusion Acts and thus gain influence not only in the economic factor, but of political as well.
Oh wow, that was longer than I thought it would be. But don't worry, because the answer is right in front of you.
With Parian having no wall of segregation and only a natural barrier, the Chinese Cebuanos were not considered as a threat by the Spanish government. Also to the fact that the dispersion of the Chinese community is neither in Lutao or in Parian.
And the Chinese ward were established not as per place of residence, but of ethnicity. Helps in dispersing the Chinese culture into a different aspect of the Cebuano culture as a whole.
I mean, where can you find a food on? A symbol of Chinese guardianship guarding an old Spanish church.
Where can you find a place where one of their famous dishes is a dim sum? A dim sum siomai, not made by a Chinese or even a Cebuano Chinese, but by the normal Cebuano who lives in this wonderful and amazing island.
It is such an amazing thing that there is even a word to describe a specific phenomenon, acculturation, where two cultures bridge to each other and adopted each other's practices, be it food, languages, and many more. No wonder this place is full of wonder. So, in the end, we need to answer now. Where exactly is Cebu Chinatown? Well, the answer is just right in front of you. There's no specific Chinatown here. Cebu itself is Chinatown.
Or just ask the two mayors who claimed it.
Oh, where have you been?
I've been looking around on the site. Oh yeah.
Okay, so I think it's time to catch your breath. Okay, alright.
I'm Huntay. I'm a researcher in this museum, and I have always been fascinated with Cebuano Chinese culture. So when the job came, I didn't hesitate to take it.
And I am Chanda, and if you want more of that, we cannot wait to show it all to you. Built in 1914 by Manuel Gutierrez, son of Pedro Gutierrez,
this building, the Cotalco building, is a place for you to learn about the Cebu Chinese culture and more. Welcome to the Cebu Chinese Heritage Museum.